Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Garry Pierre-Pierre.
And I'm Vianora Vinca. It's a little over a month before national elections in the Philippines. Already measures are being put in place to encourage voters and lessen the possibility of political violence. In January, the government issued a ban on carrying firearms. Now, a group of prominent Filipino-Americans is asking the U.S. to monitor the elections.
On this edition of Independent Sources, countering corruption and containing violence at the polls in the Philippines.
The fallout from the bruising battle for health care reform. Has immigration reform been dealt a deadly blow?
In the politics of pictures, how some journalists interpret media images of Mexico's drug wars.
We'll have those stories and news of the week after this.
You have an incredible ability to reach and to persuade and to educate, and also to make people feel comfort and hope.
National elections in the Philippines are scheduled for May 10th. Some Filipinos are worried about some new methods and some old methods at the polls. The new methods are the electronic voting machines the country is using for the first time. The old methods are election-related violence and fraud. With me to discuss the upcoming elections are Dr. Angie Cruz of Concerned Filipino-Americans USA and Anthony Advincula of New America Media. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us, Vianora.
Thank you.
We hear the reactions of the Filipinos back in the country are reactions of anxiety and mistrust in relation to the new automated election system. What's the reaction of the people in the diaspora here, Angie?
I think we are even more concerned because the Filipinos in the diaspora are more into the issues. They are more knowledgeable. I think they also have more time to really delve into the details, at least many of us. But in the Philippines, you know, I don't know what percentage is really thinking that, I don't know how many of them would be thinking, well, what will happen? I think they got used to it. I mean, I have heard people talk about that. They are jaded.
And people here in the diaspora who are used to the American election system, shouldn't they be more at peace with this new approach where perhaps there's going to be less fraud and the country would move to a more democratic sort of elections?
To be honest, that was my first reaction. Great. Like the elections here in America, we will have computerization. Wow, less fraud, less chance to cheat. Until some things were brought to our attention. People back home, some people there are already designing ways to cheat, to control the elections. So that is our problem.
Anthony, how much is there a discussion in the Filipino media about the fact that the balloting technology comes from the U.S.? It's made in Venezuela, but it comes from the U.S. Is that seen as a positive or negative thing?
This is a huge issue in the Filipino-American media because this election is crucial to the country's political and economic stability. So having that concern that the Americans will be part of the elections and that the ballots are actually coming from Venezuela and not from the Philippines. So there's a huge disconnect between the community, and this is played out by the media. Because of that continuous coverage about the disconnect, some liked it, some, the nationalists especially, they don't like it because they don't want the American government to be part of it again. You know, they say it's liberated, but it's totally not. It's until under the wings of, still under wings of the American government. So the Filipino-American media, what they're saying is enough already. You know, and the others are saying this is important because this is crucial to the country's economic and political stability. So there is it's a mixture of reactions from the media and as well as the community.
What about the government? Is the government doing enough to educate the people about the new voting system, Angie?
Okay, that is where we have a problem. Reports have reached us saying that really up to now, how many days before elections, even the Commission on Elections, their personnel have not been trained. And then the machines that they are going to use, there are not enough machines, there are not enough technicians, and I think we were told that only the Smartmatic technicians would be able to do something should the machines go wrong. And you know, with the brownouts, places lose electricity, lose power. With the heat, with the humidity, those machines may just not work well. And there are only, I don't know how many technicians to help fix them. That's what we heard. I don't know.
Well, yes, that is a concern because the lack of confidence in using this automated poll and anxiety about it because we are inexperienced handling that kind of polling. It creates paranoia, you know.
Yes.
People are not confident that this is going to be fair elections.
Are they less confident with this system as they were before?
Well, they say that this can be maneuvered especially by the incumbent officials, you know, because they have connection to the government, then they can easily rig it because it's automated, unlike the voting system, the traditional one where they have to count it manually. I guess they feel that they have more confidence in it.
A Filipino election official quoted by Manila Times says that actually there will be tighter balloting processes and fraud will be more difficult to happen, and so the likelihood of violence happening increases. Do you see more violence happening with this new change?
I would say so. You know, any deferment or cancellation or failure in this election, this upcoming election, may result in unrest. And when there is civil unrest, it creates a ripple effect. You know, it affects the political stability of the country, and it definitely going to downplay the economic part of it. So, you know, the Philippines is known for people power. You know, if the administration is not running along the continuum of what the ideas or the opinion of the masses, you know, majority of, especially in Manila, they do uprising against the government. So I'm afraid it may happen if it's not going to be a fair, reasonable election. Yeah.
And Anthony, as a journalist working in the U.S. And having worked for the Filipino-American media here, what do you hear about journalists back in your home country working on the elections? Do they fear violence this time around? How are they reporting?
You know, the Philippines is considered as one of the most dangerous places to work for journalists. You know, recently there was a massacre of journalists. I think about 50 journalists. So of course, you know, they put themselves in harm's way, but it's their responsibility to make these people aware, to inform the Filipinos about this election. So despite that fear, I'm sure they will pursue the story and dig it more deeply this time, I hope.
And as a final thought, Angie, do you see this change as a step forward to more democratic elections?
You see, if automation is done right, it could really help our elections. Be honest, be fair. The problem is, first of all, the company that they chose for the automation. When we went to Capitol Hill and to Secretary Hillary Clinton because of these concerns that we have regarding the elections. We wanted to asked them to send observers, monitors to the Philippines. And when we went to Congresswoman Maloney, she asked us, why did you choose that company? Apparently, it has been reported, it is alleged that this company has had problems in this country. Congresswoman Maloney's office investigated them because of some issues, anomalies that they were suspecting. So they said, why did you choose that? That's the first. The second is that all of a sudden, there are so many brownouts. The electricity, just, you know, they lose electricity every now and then. They are wondering, is this the precursor of what will happen? Actually, what we are afraid now, Vianora, at this point, and I don't know, Anthony, if you will agree with me, the failure of elections. That somehow nobody may be elected, and then what will happen? The present government will stay on. That would really be.
And we'll unfortunately have to leave it at that, but we'll definitely keep an eye on the developments in the Philippines. Dr. Angie Cruz and Anthony Advincula, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Here's Marlene Peralta with some other news.
Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. The 2010 census will count Arabs as white, despite a campaign to change that, New American Media reports. The chief of the Ethnicity and Ancestry branch of the Census Bureau told NAM that anybody from Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East will be classified as white. Ironically, it was Arab Americans themselves who first petitioned to be identified as white during the first wave of Arab immigration to the U.S. in the 19th century. The Philippines News reports that Asian immigrants are more likely to die of breast cancer than U.S.-born Asians. The statistics were released in the American Journal of Public Health. The new study shows that distinct groups within the Asian American community, such as Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, wildly differ in death and disease rates, including breast cancer and heart disease. A proposed conversion bill in Israel has hit another setback. According to the Forward, some American Jewish organizations are concerned the new amendments made to the bill undermines its original purpose, which is to grant municipal rabbis the authority to perform conversions. These conversions can benefit the 300,000 Israeli immigrants who are not considered Jewish according to the religious law halacha and have a difficult time converting under the current system. El Diario La Prensa reports that Hispanic students are taking longer to graduate from college and others are dropping out with more frequency compared to the white counterparts. According to a new report from the American Enterprise Institute, only 51% of Hispanics graduate from college in 6 years, compared to 59% of white students. And finally, Cuba is now allowing sex changes to be performed, Caribbean Life reports. The island, known for being anti-gay, had a similar program 20 years ago, but it was suspended by the government. The initiative is now being pushed by Raúl Castro's daughter, Mariela, Cuba's top gay activist. Castro said the government is moving cautiously, only doing a few operations per year. Those are just a few headlines from the ethnic media.
The healthcare reform bill that Democrats pushed through has poisoned the well on future bipartisan cooperation. So says Senator Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina Republican who has been working with Democrat Charles Schumer to fashion an immigration reform bill. Is immigration reform possible in the near future? What strategy are advocates for immigrants planning now? To explore where they go from here, I'm joined by Sandy Placido of the Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigration Rights and Gabriela Villareal of the New York Immigration Coalition. Welcome. But before we start our discussions, let's look at this clip from Brooklyn Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez.
President Barack Obama consistently has said that he is going to lead the way for comprehensive immigration reform. I believe that President Barack Obama is a man of his word, and I take him at his word, unless I hear differently.
Sandy, is Barack Obama, President Obama, reneging his pledge on immigration reform? Or if so, what's the strategy to get the issue back in the front burner?
Well, yes, Obama did make many promises during his campaign and since being elected that immigration reform was a priority for him. He, reaffirmed that in his State of the Union address, even though it was very briefly. However, I think that with the healthcare reform debate and the recent vote on that, immigration has yet to take center stage in DC. So I do think that right now immigrant rights groups are kind of trying to strategize to figure out what the next steps should be and how to best get immigration reform on the table.
Gabriela, what's the strategy?
There are a couple of strategies. Today marks the beginning of the congressional spring recess, where our representatives are in their home states, in their local offices, and this is an opportunity where New Yorkers and immigrant advocates can go to their offices, request meetings with their legislators, and demand immigration reform now. I think there's also an opportunity for us to continue flexing our political muscle. There's an event that's being planned for April 10th in the morning up at John Hay Park in northern Manhattan, where we will be joining with the New York State Youth Leadership Council for the launching of what's being called the New York Trail of Tears. And it's a group of young adults who are spreading the word about the stories that millions of immigrants here in the United States face. So they're taking a march from New York City all the way to Washington, D.C. with the plan of being there on May 1st, which is a historic immigrant and labor rights day, to just collect stories and bring awareness to the issue. Also in New York City, we have a history of planning a major labor and immigrant rights events. So we are co-sponsoring with a number of labor unions an event that's taking place at 11 a.m., a march and a rally for immigrant rights and labor rights that will march down Broadway all the way from Foley Square, that's where it starts, and it will end in Battery Park with an exciting rally and speakers to show the support for immigration reform.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the right has done a very good job in framing the issue of immigrant reform as being something bad for America. And what is immigration reform? What does that mean exactly? I mean, Gabriela, you just mentioned a lot of events that are going on, but how are these events going to shape the policy that hopefully you want that will be passed in Washington by Congress?
I think that one of the things we do as organizers and advocates is that we definitely have developed talking points, and for us, when we have these events, it very much looks like just a protest, a rally, a mass of people, but as Gabriela said, when we meet with legislative aides in the congressional district offices or in DC, we make sure to bring with us literature. And so some of the demands, immigration reform is very, very complex. It's not just amnesty, which I think a lot of people see as a very scary, or, I think that's something that preoccupies a lot of people on the right. But in reality, what we're looking for is for, pathways to citizenship and legalization that are fair, that take into account people's families, how much they've contributed to this country. We're looking for more rights to be upheld when people are in detention, facing deportation, when they're in immigration court. We're looking for more visas. We're looking for just really ways to kind of regulate immigration in a way that's more humane and just and keeps families together. So it's very complex, and I think we show our power in different ways, and we work with lawyers, advocates, and we just try to get the message across to everyone we can. Yes.
Gabriela, path to citizenship, what does that mean? Break it down for us.
Giving an opportunity for the 12 million immigrant family members and workers that are here, recognizing that they have contributed to American society, have been employed, have been, in many cases, paying taxes, have been a part of faith groups, are raising their children in American schools, and giving them their opportunity to show that they do want to be a part of the United States and fully contribute. So giving an opportunity for citizenship would mean an adjustment of status for those that don't have immigration status here that's legal, and getting them on a path to meet certain requirements and to show that and demonstrate that they have been contributing to our economy and they are a part of our community.
Gabriela, let's talk about the reality of immigration reform. Obama just used a whole lot of political capital to push a healthcare reform bill. Does he have any currency left to push this?
Well, change takes courage, and when he was on the campaign trail, he said that he would make immigration reform a priority for his first year. And we are still waiting for him to show his political leadership and make this happen and get us past the finish line, if you will. I think we also need to be mindful about the reality. Having immigration reform legislation is very important. We need bipartisan support. We need both the House and the Senate to move a bill. We already have a bill that was introduced in December by Representative Gutierrez that had nearly 100 co-sponsors.
It's from where again?
Representative Gutierrez is from Chicago. Okay. And we are still anticipating a bill to be introduced by Senators Schumer and Graham in the Senate
of South Carolina.
Of South Carolina. Okay. With that being said, we still have a process that the administration, the Obama administration, can take immediate steps. It is unconscionable that the Obama administration, during its first year, has deported nearly 400,000 immigrant workers, family members, for people who have not committed violent, serious crimes. There are a lot of people who are entangled, not just undocumented immigrants, but this includes green card holders who have been in the United States for decades and have families here, have U.S. citizen spouses and children. So when we go back to the president, we say, we need your leadership. We want you to move this bill forward, but your Department of Homeland Security really needs to examine its immigration enforcement practices.
So can he do it? Can he push it? Will he push it?
Senator Schumer of New York has definitely taken a lot of leadership, as Gabriela said. He's been working with Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. What's been holding them back is being able to find a second Republican to co-sponsor the bill. And in addition, one issue is that 2010 is also an election year for both senators and members of the House of Representatives. So it's a difficult year, but there have been commitments made by both Schumer and by Obama. Both Gabriela and I have heard different things, that maybe in April Schumer's bill will be introduced, maybe after the election season in November, maybe at the very end of this year. But again, Obama's leadership is something that the senators are actually looking for, and in a meeting that happened a few weeks ago, it was one of the things that Lindsey Graham asked Obama to do.
Gabriela, one final thought. Can Obama find that one Republican to push this forward?
I think that with his leadership and with the continued leadership of the Senate and vocal members such as Nydia Velázquez and Representative Gutierrez, that there is pressure. However, on March 21st, just a little over a week ago, over 200,000 immigrants and their allies came out and said a clear signal. We want immigration reform now, and it needs to happen for our communities and for our families and for our workforce. So we strongly hope that bipartisan legislation gets introduced in the Senate as soon as the month of April. But we also expect leadership from the leaders of the Democratic Party and the president to move this forward.
Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it at that. Sandy Placido and Gabriela Villareal, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you for having us.
Many thanks, Garry.
We'll be right back.
Violence on the U.S.-Mexico border has gotten worse, particularly in Juarez, across from El Paso, Texas. The recent shootings of U.S. consulate workers in Juarez provoked outrage in the Obama administration. The incidents intensified doubts about the Mexican government's strategy for stopping the bloodshed. Michelle García asked several journalists to discuss some images in the media that portrayed violence in Mexico and found early clues that all was not as it seemed.
Ever since then, newly elected President Felipe Calderón announced an offensive against Mexico's drug cartels in 2006. Images of violence in Mexico have played a powerful role in framing the issue.
A lot of the material that you see in the New York Times piece and 60 Minutes, as always, were very good. And what they convey is kind of an anarchy that exists, in this case, primarily in Juarez.
This decapitated man was left hanging from a bridge. His head was found in the town square.
To show the scope of the the manning of the government troops, and I think these things did. B, you have to show the gruesome results of a drug war, and I think these pictures do.
These samples of early coverage conveyed a singular message to veteran American journalist Bill Small.
That image is supportive of the government efforts. It makes it look as if they're throwing, a ton of manpower and weaponry into this fight.
The same images seen through the perspective of a Mexican journalist turned drug historian evokes a vastly different reaction.
It has all the stereotypes. Supposedly the government is fighting organized criminality.
Froylán Enciso says the good guy versus bad guy narrative within the images leaves little room for critical questions.
Nobody wants to be on the side of the criminals. So when the media construct the image of the criminal, they give the government or the Mexican government the opportunity to increase the criminalization and to increase the violence. I remember, for example, Calderon wearing an uniform as a soldier, like the first days of the government. Then I started to worry, something is going to happen.
Violence in Mexico skyrocketed in recent years from several hundred to well over 10,000 dead after President Calderon deployed the military. And now the tide has turned on the Mexican government's strategy.
But the violence is making life worse, and many are beginning to question the point of having the army in Juarez at all.
With all the focus on the military crackdown, the underlying story of Juarez, says photographer Julián Cardona, was largely absent, the social disintegration underway. What Cardona in a recent photo slideshow termed the failed state.
Se encuentra un eco o una propagación en los medios, ya sean nacionales, locales o extranjeros. Muy frecuentemente otros factores que inciden en la realidad social de Juárez no se consideran, como el perfil de las víctimas, en muchos casos pobres o en muchos casos puchadores de muy bajo calibre, y lo que está vinculado a ellos, que es el tráfico de drogas a nivel local, el mercado interno local.
With hundreds of complaints of human rights abuses filed against the military and a worsening violence, the good guys versus bad guys storyline has become murky.
Que no vemos más allá son situaciones en las que pudieran presumirse casos de las fuerzas del Estado relacionados con tortura u otro tipo de delitos. Es rarísimo que alguien que ha tenido una experiencia así se abra para los medios y que puedan conseguir otro tipo de imágenes. Así que muy frecuentemente ves imágenes de soldados recorriendo las calles, etcétera, así, no de sus víctimas, por ejemplo.
The street and social breakdown is the image still to be captured, not in some distant land, but right next door in Mexico. For Independent Sources, I'm Michelle García.
That's our show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
In the meantime, be independent-minded.